Hi, we've missed you. I'm gonna have to start by giving you a big apology because at the beginning of the season, we said that we are back and we're back with full force, and we had the time to dedicate a full season of episodes to you, and we'd love to hear back from you. And then we disappeared for 6 months. I am your host, Mina Sawiris, with my amazing co-host, Father Elijah Stefanos, who's probably 90% of the reason why we haven't been back in so long. Priesthood does occupy a little bit more than the average time for people, so we're going to put most of the blame on him. But we are back and we are very excited. We promised you that we're not going to say special guests anymore, but we have a dear friend with us today. Um, our dear friend Sandra Mathoslah Sayegh. First of all, hi Sandra, and hi Father Elijah.
Hi guys.
Hi, hi, Mina. I will own that. I will take full responsibility to all those who we have committed to saying that we were going to do a full season of episodes. But hey, we're back. Better late than never, you know? So we're hoping that we can build some momentum with Sandra and hopefully get a bunch of episodes sort of recorded and sent out to y'all and hope that you will benefit. My apologies to every person who listens to this, including my mom and Mina's mom.
Yes,
Sorry,
absolutely.
Mama.
Sorry, mamas. But yeah, and to our benefit too is that these discussions are very beneficial to us. And when we sleep on them for so long, we miss out on having some great discussions and having some amazing guests. So today is no different. Today we have a hot topic, um, fasting or fasting done right. And for the record, Father Elijah, I'd like to tell everyone that I suggested a different name, a title for the episode. I wanted it to be called "I Can't Believe It's Not Butter." Sandra. And Father Elijah shut that down very quickly.
It's not I shut it down. I just think sometimes Mina's okay with people not knowing what the subject means. And I'm more of like I take our listeners at face value and let's not complicate it for people.
I like to be vague, Sandra.
The,
So,
the mystery could lure people in, you
I know
never
as
know.
I
see,
think as I thought about it last night, I was talking to Heba about it. She was like, you should have went with that. Like I think Mina was onto something there.
see,
So
see,
I will
and
next time I will defer to you, Mina, and I will take
and and a big
your
shout out to Heba for getting myself and Father Elijah these reintroduction podcast mugs. Thank you so much, Heba.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah, so ears if you can see it, you can't see it, but I'm no longer drinking out of plastic bottles. Thank you, Heba. Um,
thank you, Heba.
Sandra, um, I mean, I've been talking for 5 minutes and I haven't even introduced you yet.
That's okay.
But I'm gonna tell people quickly that you are a great friend of mine and a great friend of Father Elijah for many years in the teens of years, probably at this point.
Yeah.
Sandra is an active duty pharmacist in the United States Public Health Service. So aside from that being a really cool job, she really gets to help out a lot in providing assistance in the wake of natural disasters and responding to disease outbreaks. She spent some time in Liberia during the Ebola outbreak. So she's a hero to many, including myself and Father Elijah, honestly.
Well,
Um, she also is the chief pharmacist at the U.S. Coast Guard in North Carolina, and she holds a master's of science in nutrition, which is going to become very handy and pivotal in our discussion today about nutrition and fasting. So I'm very, very excited to have this discussion. She's a mother of about to be three kids. Um,
yes. Pray for me.
um, and she has uh, she's done some great services in the Coptic Orthodox Church. Notably, she was one of the co-founders of her first love retreat, which is held annually at the convent in Georgia. So, Sandra, thank you so much for being with
Mina, I
us
need to
today.
jump in. Fun
Yes,
fact.
yes,
Sandra was actually in Heba and I's wedding.
Okay, that's
that's
right.
right.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
and,
Sandra is very near and dear to both Heba and myself.
and I
And
was in your wedding too. Don't
Yes,
forget
yes,
that.
of course. I mean,
Yes,
that's a
yeah.
given.
I also have to say another fun fact is that Heba was one of the original co-founders of Her First Love as well. So
That
so
is
yeah,
true.
we go way back, yeah.
Way back.
Big shout out. Thank you for coming, Sandra. This episode has been years in the making, right? In a
Yeah,
way.
probably.
So thank you for being with us today.
Thank you
Um,
for having me.
this episode is really, the timing of it is great because we're on the last day of Jonah's fast, but we are preparing for the Great Lent. And one of the most important things in our discussion has to do with um, where we are today with fasting. There's an interesting story that I've heard being said to kids as they grow up, and it's about fasting. And there's a group of monkeys, and the chief monkey says, "I would like all of us to start fasting together." And everyone thought that was a great idea. And he said, "But in order for us to be ready to eat when we break our fast, we're going to send uh, a couple of monkeys out to collect the bananas for us, so that when we're ready to break our fast, we can eat them." And everyone thought that was a wonderful idea. They sent out some monkeys. They collected so many bananas, and they came back with so many bananas. And the chief said, "That's great. Now we have a lot of bananas when we're ready to break our fast." And someone suggested, "Hey, why don't we give them out individually so that we each have them and we can cut out time in distributing them after, so that when we break our fast, we're ready to eat." Someone else said, "That's a wonderful idea. Let's do it." So they distributed the bananas. Um, and then the chief's wife said, "Well, why don't we just peel the bananas so that they're ready for us to eat once we break our fast?" And they decided to peel the bananas. And then one little boy said to his daddy monkey, he said, "Daddy, maybe I can just keep the banana in my mouth so that when we're done fasting, I can chew it right away." And then everyone thought that was a wonderful, wonderful idea. And they proceeded to put the bananas in their mouth. This story is significant because although we're not monkeys, I'm not comparing any of us monkeys, but a lot of times fasting today feels like we're putting the banana already in our mouth. We're trying to figure out ways to cut, to make things easier, to reshape fasting. We are very proud in the church that we have kept some ancient traditions of fasting alive, but also in recent times we might have revamped or stretched or adapted some different these traditions to some cultural things that are happening around us. So I'd like to start by saying and asking the definitive question of what is fasting and what is it not? And are we monkeys eating bananas in our mouth?
I have never heard that story, but it's it's a good like analogy for how it does feel
Yeah.
sometimes. Well, first of all, that question, what is fasting? It's so interesting because it seems so basic, like we all know. I mean, most of us, the Orthodox faithful, know what fasting. I mean, especially cradle Orthodox. I mean, we've been fasting probably since we were like 2 years old, without us even knowing. Um, so yeah, it is it seems so basic, but honestly, I think what ends up happening in the Orthodox community with fasting is that it gets pigeonholed. It's either just a physical thing, and there's so much emphasis on the food, so much discussion about the food, so much planning and extra groceries and extra, like, it's just like overwhelmingly about the physical part and the food part. Or people are kind of turned off by the food part and they're like, I don't need to do that part. I'll just do the spiritual aspect of fasting, right?
Mm.
I'll tithe more. I will watch less TV. I will, you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like there are kind of two camps about fasting. It's not always like that for everyone, but I just feel like it easily devolves into that. It's either this physical thing or a spiritual thing. But fasting is so much of both of those things. And actually, they don't work apart from each other. The physical has to go with the spiritual, especially in fasting. And this might sound a little bit funny, but I actually think, well, we have discussed in other forums, like the secular age that we're in right now. I'm by no means well versed on that, but I think in our secular age right now, and the way that modern medicine is practiced, actually, I think that it is lending to our mentality of separating body and spirit. So, like, when you go to a physician, if you have a problem or if you have pain somewhere or you have some physical issue that you want to address with the physician, 99% of the time, your physician's not going to bring up anything spiritual, right? And that even
Yeah.
seems counterintuitive. If you're thinking it, like even talking about it now, does it seem kind of weird? Like, of course, you're like, of course, your doctor's not going to talk about your spiritual life or like your soul or your emotions or your mind and how it might contribute to your physical ailment, right? So, I mean, even in that modern practice, the two pieces of who we are, I mean, essentially, are completely separated. So I think all of that, like in our society, our culture, the medical practice, everything, it just lends to this, and it trickles over into our spiritual lives where fasting, and we know, I mean, I want to say too, and you guys jump in, like I know that in the back of our minds as Orthodox Christians, that fasting, we know fasting is our gateway for spiritual healing. But I think when the emphasis comes so much about the food, it's just hard to, which is, counterproductive in fasting, in seasons of fasting. It's hard to remember why we're fasting in the first place. So, um, and I also want to make a little plug, of course, because of the nutrition aspect. Um, Fasting is not finding a vegan alternative to every single food that we like during the Fatar. So, which I think tends to be a little bit of a thing, especially like, when people are celebrating a milestone during fast, like if there's a birthday or if there's, I mean, it's either we just eat Fatari food or we find a vegan alternative that you can't even tell it's vegan because it tastes so good, or so and I think that part too is interesting because like I don't know, have you guys been to any like Orthodox setting when it's time of fasting and people are like reading ingredients, and they're like, oh no, this has whey casein in it or something, you know what I mean? Like they're every single line is read. I mean, I don't know. There's just something about that whole process of us like being so particular about the little ingredients and forgetting like this like spiritual. Let me just say, I'm not by any means saying don't read the ingredients. I'm just saying when all of the emphasis and energy is on that, I think it just really takes away from the experience, from the journey of fasting. So.
You know what's funny, Sandra, as you say that, I was reading something from Saint Jerome yesterday, and he was saying there is a risk that fasting can turn into some sort of tightening noose that has nothing to do with Christ or with Lent, which the byproduct of fasting ought to be that it should draw me into deeper loving union with God, right? And somehow, some way, we get caught up in the food and the ingredients and the logistics of it.
Yeah.
And not to say that the food is not important, because really we've understood from the desert that the belly impacts a lot of other things, right? So if we can learn to say no to a cheeseburger, you learn to say no to a lot of other things. But I think the problem is that when love isn't the catalyst for why we do what we do, right? If the motivation, like it says, this kind can come out not with nothing other but fasting and prayer, right? And we read in our liturgical, like right now during the 3 days of this fast of Nineveh, we read the fasting and prayer fraction where it says fasting and prayer, fasting and prayer, fasting and prayer, and all the different things that fasting and prayer has done, the miracles in the lives of people. And somehow, some way, still we have turned it into, oh, like, is this creamer non-dairy, or is this creamer have like a little bit of like artificial ingredients? And it's like, for those who are listening to this podcast that maybe aren't familiar with Orthodox fasting during most seasons of the years, we go completely vegan. And this vegan diet, basically the goal of it is for us to return back to our pre-fallen state in the garden, in which Adam and Eve lived in loving union with God, when food wasn't something that they used for the satisfaction of themselves. It was just for sustenance, and their real food was the food that they were sustained by God in. So we're trying to return back to that state. And Lent is a season in which most of the West already has started what Lent, but for Copts and many Orthodox Christians have also started Lent, but for Coptic Orthodox Christians, we are going to start Lent on March 11th. So this topic is timely because we're in the middle of a fast that will end tomorrow morning. And there are many people who've been fasting the last 3 days and maybe not touching into the prayer piece of it, including me at times, where you're just kind of caught into the action and losing sight of the end goal. And it just causes a lot of messiness. So this is why we thought it would be really great for us to bring on Sandra, because as she expressed to all of us, kind of the mindsets of a lot of us may be totally not aligned to what the intention of fasting was. Is fasting become a noose for us, or has it become something that really frees us in order to be able to love God more?
Yeah, and Father Elijah, I wanted to touch on a couple things you said. One is that verse where Christ is saying that this kind, when he was referring to a demon-possessed young boy, actually, and they said it's in Matthew 17, it says he had seizures and he was like throwing himself into fire and water and things like that. But he said it was a demon, and he said this kind cannot come out like by without prayer or fasting. And then also you referenced the fraction. It's fasting and prayer. It's not just fasting, and it's not just prayer. You see how the combination just in that phrase alone is that it's your physical self-denial, and also in that self-denial, it's a direction to Christ, to God. So you don't just self-deny, because one thing that is important to note is that there are other religions that practice fasting. And actually in the New Age realm, there's a lot of fasting, and then there's intermittent fasting for like physique and whatever, you know what I'm saying? So there are health benefits to just strictly fasting in those realms. And also, like I said, in other religions, they practice forms of fasting, but it's the orientation. The difference is in the Orthodox Christian fasting, it's the orientation to Christ along with self-denial. So some religions end at self-denial with no other reorientation or, encouragement thereof. So that's what it's like. It's not just self-denial for the fact of making yourself like improved. It's self-denial for making yourself less and making God more. So anyway, that's something to note. And
And
then also, yeah, go ahead.
shout out to Father Anthony Paul, who is a guest of this episode. He spoke specifically about the fact that ascetic practices can have nothing to do with God. So just
Yep,
want to
exactly.
reference that as a conversation worth listening to from past episodes.
Yeah.
Sorry, no,
Yeah,
I interrupted you, Sandra. Please
No,
continue.
go ahead, Mina.
no, I was gonna say, as you guys are talking in about this point of self-denial or like discipline, and some of these things, that the way we view them is that they end up becoming as byproducts of fasting and not the intentional goal of fasting itself. Because like you're saying is, I can be very disciplined about going to the gym and exercising, and I would adhere to that religiously in a way, but I would still fail to love my neighbor. And that doesn't mean because I've already mastered self-discipline in a gym that means that I can love my neighbor endlessly.
Yep,
They don't go together.
yep,
So the focus of the fast, if it's only for disciplinary purpose, it doesn't achieve
exactly.
what we have set out to say. And that's kind of what you've touched upon, Sandra, when you said that the goal then of the Orthodox fasting is to put us back in union with God and reorient us back towards God. And that
Yep,
becomes um, that point and that goal. Uh,
exactly. But and also, tie related to that is union with each other,
mm,
and a union with ourselves. I mean,
mm,
if you think about if you think about it, the way we live in our society today, especially those of us in America, it's so easy to be disconnected from yourself. I mean, um, in many settings, like you, and actually, and unfortunately, I'm sure Father Elijah, you know, in a in a in a role of service, it's actually the easiest, I think, to disconnect from yourself, even unwittingly, because you are so focused on the other. But there is a very important aspect of connection when to stay connected to your true self, which is only true in Christ, you know. And the only reason why I bring that up is because I feel like specifically in the Coptic community, we forget about that piece, you know, and Christ said to love others the way you love yourself. I mean, that part is not, you know, that's important and it's very overlooked. So that I just think that that trifecta of connection is really important to highlight during fasting. We It's supposed to be a time where we can slow down enough to connect with God, connect with others, and connect with ourselves. We a lot of times are going through the motions, and we just, especially those of us who have a daily routine, you have to go through, you have to do this, you have to pack this for this person, you have to get this ready, you have to fill your gas, you have, or charge your car, or you know what I mean? Like whatever it is, there's just these things we do. We're cyclical, like, you know, so we forget to touch base with ourselves and Christ in a meaningful way. Even those of us who have normal rhythm in the church and spiritual practices and everything, they can become just like, you know, something that we do. Like I know I need to drink water. I know I need to do this. I go to the, like, you know, it can be basic thing without actually having a connection. But if I may, there is one other thing I wanted to touch on from what you said, Father Elijah, which is the fasting periods are supposed to bring us back to our pre-fallen state, and I really love that you highlighted that. And that's specifically because of the food part. What's so interesting is I'm finding more and more that people are more sick, more fatigued, and more unhealthy during times of fast than they are during fatar, during non-fasting seasons. And I can tell you from a nutritional aspect, it makes total sense. And the reason why is because most people, not everybody, so those of you who aren't doing it, shout out to you, but most people during fasts are eating a lot of packaged foods, a lot of, you know, vegan veggie patties, and they're really, like, if you look at the ingredients, there's like not a single vegetable in it. It's like it's all chemicals, you know. And it was made in a lab. Which, fun fact, I told you guys, I warned everybody I was coming for Impossible Burgers, but they did a little bit of a test with dogs. And they put Impossible Burgers in front of them and they would not touch it. They would
That's
not
interesting.
touch it. Okay, so anyway, that's
They
just a
should
side
they
note.
should put it in front of monkeys next and see what they do.
I know exactly. They'll probably eat it. But anyway, so you know, and I want you to imagine this, like the goal in a season of fast is to go back to the pre-fallen state where we're walking with God. You know, we're in the garden. We're at ease because we are our true selves, and he is the one giving us our identity, walking with him, right? And of course, you know, I imagine Adam and Eve being energetic and, you know, have just like no physical ailments. You know, there's no, I mean, that's the pre-fallen state, right? But imagine, like, in this season of fasting, you are at your worst physically. That it just doesn't make sense. Like, if you do you find yourself, if you find yourself more sluggish, more fatigued, having digestive issues, like more acne or breakouts, like this should, none of that should occur. I mean, aside from like outlier situations, but for the majority of us, um, what we're choosing to eat out of, let's say, convenience. Because listen, an Impossible Burger, frying it up on a pan for 5 minutes or putting it in the microwave, I get it. I really get it. Especially when it's already hard enough and you're like, I don't know how to do a vegan meal. I'm going to use these packaged vegan foods. I understand, but I would also encourage people to even use that as an opportunity to deepen your fast. If you are having to slow down to prepare your meal or to simplify your meal, like what if your dinner is a bunch of vegetables in a bowl, with like some olive oil and salt and pepper? What if it's that? You know, is it glamorous? No, it's not glamorous, but it's simple, it's hydrating. There are no chemicals in there. I mean, relatively speaking. But anyway, it's not like this preformed, man-made, weird, like alien food, you know. Um, but anyway, all of that practice in and of itself of just having a bowl of vegetables or lentils or whatever it is, just that practice alone where you're slowing down and you're having to make a little bit of extra time to eat something that's natural and that nourishes your body. All of that can be part of fasting, Um, you know, uh, you can fast from convenience in a way, like, and which is so hard in America to do, you know. I've known just anecdotally, I've known some people who stopped using their personal vehicle during the fast so that they would have to, so it'd be less convenient for them because it would take more time. They'd have to plan a little bit more. And they use their public transportation to read or pray or,
Wow.
whatever else. And they couldn't get from point A to point B, on the drop of, whatever, just easily with their own volition. So anyway, just certain things like that we don't think about. And it's all tied together. That's why what I initially was mentioning was that it's not just physical, it's not just spiritual. They're so deeply intertwined. Um, and that's why, like we mentioned already, the fasting and prayer is the phrase. It's not just one or the other. So, um, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot, but
No,
I wanted
please.
to say I read also um, from Saint Basil the Great. He said that we are naturally hungry beings, but we have forgotten that we're hungry for God. So this season of fasting also helps if you can pause long enough to acknowledge your hunger and not feed it with food. Your spirit can have a chance to remind you that hunger that is deeper than just your hunger for food. It's a hunger for God, for your creator. So, and I really just like just that imagery. It's very small and simple, but if we even before we eat whatever vegan meal, if we can pause and say, I'm not feeding my hunger in the way I want to satisfy it right now, because my only true satisfaction is Christ, you know? And imagine if you do that every day during a season of fasting, especially during the Lenten fast. I mean, that kind of practice can help you get into a mindset even beyond the fast, which is the goal. It's not supposed to be like, holy 55 days and then we're done. It's like, it's almost like it's an ongoing deepening in the path that we want to go, which is to Christ. So anyways, I'll stop now.
Mm. You've said a lot of gems in there.
Mhm. Mhm.
There's a lot of there's a lot of hard truths that we talk about here because you talk about uh, something that is being you talk about food not being the focus, but you also talk about it not being convenient. And a lot of times we think that these two things are at odds, but they don't have to be. So just because it's taking me longer to prepare my food doesn't mean that I'm focused more on it.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
And I'm gathering that as you speak and think about it more because, yes, okay, um, the point is not to dwell on the food and make things simple. So as I go to the grocery store to pick up some more food that I might not have at home instead of that packaged whatever, I can use that time also as my fasting journey.
Yeah.
Whether I am being more observant or seeing more people in need or whatever, that is part of the journey of fasting. And if it's done that way, with that level of intentionality, at the end of it, once the 40 days or the 55 days are over, it's not like boom. It's like
Ex
everything we've done in the last however many days is gone, and then let's just
exactly.
feast. Because in a way, like the church does speak a lot about how can we keep that spirit of Lent after Lent is over, but culturally speaking, it's gone. Like
Oh
once
yeah,
we
it
break that
drops off real
fast,
fast.
right? Yeah. So that, yeah, that idea and that notion of like focus and intentionality and is important. And I do vividly remember a day um, when during a fast, I was, and I reflected on this in retrospect, is that I was driving home, and at the time I passed by a, a bunch of homeless people. I didn't think much of it, um, and just kept driving, and then stopped at a red traffic light and pulled out my phone just like everyone else does and filtered through the news headlines and a ton of tragic news headlines. And then once the light turned green, I forgot all about it. Um, Went home and went on social media, liked some posts about people getting surgeries, sent my um, prayers, thoughts and prayers to them, and then looked for something to watch on Netflix. And when it came time to eat, I went to my pantry and I looked at the back of one of the containers and I was like, oh, good, it doesn't have butter in it. I can eat it. Um, or I think it was the opposite. I think it was no, it was oh, this has butter in it. I can't eat it, and I was so proud of myself for for fasting and not eating something that had butter in it. Yet I missed so many opportunities to share in the pain of others that day by itself. And at the end of the day, I lost no sleep because I recalled myself as one of the fasting and that I'm eating and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm following the rules. Um, but like you said, and someone had said this before, is that fasting is not just about giving up, it's about giving. Like the church does not separate almsgiving
Mhm.
from fasting. Like
Yes.
if you're talking about fasting not to give up things, no, we don't focus on that. That's a byproduct. But if I'm going to fast about giving so I can regain self-control or go back to this pre-fallen state, if I'm fasting from the love of money, what is the answer? How do you battle that? It's by giving money. Okay, how do you give money? You look for opportunities to give money. If I'm battling the love of food, how do you combat that? Then by giving away food. Pride, by giving away humility.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Selfishness, by standing there and looking for opportunities to be with others and help them. It's by giving and giving and giving and giving. And that's the point of fasting. The fasting is not abstaining, it's giving. And abstaining just because you have no time for yourself. Like literally, that you're so focused on becoming one with God and funneling that grace to others that you don't have so much time to worry about food and eating and you reorient your brain. But when we don't do that and our entire focus is on making sure that we're eating the right things, not saying we shouldn't eat the right things, but when that
Yeah.
is the entire focus, then you can go 10 years fasting without having any spiritual growth,
Yeah.
which I would confess that I have probably fasted since, yeah, like most Coptic people, like, since I was like 7 years old, or I don't know, so young, and was so thought that was such an intriguing idea, and been fasting all the church fasts since. And then there had been years that went by without any real spiritual growth because the focus was just on
On the
what do
food.
I, yeah,
Yeah.
what do I do, and we're not really saying anything revolutionary here tonight. Like,
I know. I was gonna say I completely
No, but
agree.
I think what you guys are highlighting is really powerful and important because I think you're saying fasting is about drawing near to God, learning to discipline my will, learning to find the areas in my life where there is brokenness in order for Him to come in and to heal. And the byproduct of that is I also, when I'm aware of my own brokenness, I'm also aware of the hurts and the pains of those around me. And the byproduct of that is I become keenly aware of my need to do, right? Like, I think sometimes we think it's like all these things, like it's like prayer, fasting, almsgiving, like three different like subcategories that I need to do when I'm fasting. But I think it really is the same journey.
Oh
It's
yeah.
like, it's like I fast because in this season, I desperately need to hunger and thirst for Jesus. I really need Him to come in and to make me acutely aware of the areas where I have ailments. And in those areas where I have ailments, when I'm hungry, when I am actually have like a real area in my life where I've said no to, like I think there's something really interesting that you both are highlighting, right? We live in a time right now in which we have so much wealth and so much freedom.
Hmm.
And when you have so much wealth and so much freedom, that is a spiritual disaster.
Yeah.
So what we are saying right now is we are basically, in a way, making ourselves poor because we have access and the capacity to do everything that we possibly can and want, but we're choosing to say, you know what, it's not about me in this moment, it's about the other. And we're taking our freedom and saying, you know what, I am putting myself under submission to God to allow Him to make me aware of the areas where I really need Him in order for Him to make me more and more like Him. Like Father Anthony Paul was saying, image and likeness, right? The goal of image and likeness is that when I'm emptying, He is refining and refining and refining in order for to meet me to be like Him and in order for me to go out and love those around me in the way that He loves them. And I think sadly, for me, like echoing you, Mina, for many years I fasted and I missed the mark completely on what the goal was. And that's why I hated fasting, right? And then now I find myself that after fasts are over, I'm like, man, I actually really miss fasting because there's like this boot camp that you're in. You're really like
Mhm.
focused and you're really like disciplined. Then after you're like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do now?
mm,
And you're supposed to like fast in order to really feast, but not feast in like, let me destroy myself as a byproduct after and go to like Korean barbecue spots every day and like stuff myself with as much meat as I possibly can. You're supposed to
Yeah,
be like a an incremental thing. So I just wonder if somehow, what do you guys think about this? Like somehow we've divided like fasting, prayer, and alms from one another
mm.
and we focused on the food, we've missed the prayer and the alms, like forget it. That's like, you tell people what is alms or what are you talking about alms? Like there is this disconnect that I think sometimes happens. So
for
I don't know.
sure.
What do you guys think?
I mean, I just I just want to say like it's so important to know that the only person that can connect all of those things is Christ. So the reason why they get disconnected is because we're trying to achieve that end itself. Like if I'm on a spiritual journey and I'm like, I want to be more giving, and that's your end, then there will be an end even in that endeavor, right? And then you're going to also be focusing on almsgiving as a task in and of itself. But that is not the goal. If you are truly denying yourself in a way where you're making more space for Christ to grow and dwell inside of you, almsgiving and spiritual connection and connection with others and lending a hand, all of it will be a natural outpouring of Christ's presence in you. So those things get disconnected if the end goal is not union with Christ, you know? Um, they become tasks, they become on my spiritual to-do list, but that's not even right. The only thing we should have on our spiritual, I mean, in my opinion, please speak to your father of confession and spiritual guide about this. But I mean, as far as I can tell from all of scripture, the number one goal is unity with Christ. And then you naturally will give more because of Christ, not because of you or your spiritual to-do list. You know, things get disjointed when the goal is those little tasks and not Christ himself. And I wanted to say too, another thing about the Garden of Eden and our pre-fallen state. If you think about it, the first like fasting commandment that God gave Adam and Eve was to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They were supposed to fast from that,
Mm.
you know? And if you think about, honestly, absolutely one of my favorite stories of all humanity is what happened in the garden, because sometimes I look at it and I'm like, come on, people, like that was your one thing, you know, like you ruined it for the rest of us. Like, why did this happen? But honestly, we do it all the time, every day. And what I think is so amazing, like we reach for the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil every day. You know what? I always thought it was so interesting that the names of the trees, I mean, so the tree of knowledge of good and evil is self-reliance. If you think about it,
Mm.
that tree represents self-reliance, because if I eat from that tree, I have knowledge of both what's good and what's bad, and I can decide for myself what is good and what is bad, what's good for me, what's bad for me, you know? And also, I can look at an event in life. Oh, somebody got into a car accident. That's bad, according to my human mind. Oh, somebody got a promotion. That's good, according to my human mind. But who is the one who truly sees whether that is good or bad? If the promotion leads to pride and greed and whatever, it's not good. And if the car accident leads to humility and ultimately eternal salvation, then it's good, right? You know, but like our human minds want to decipher and decide things by our own definition. So that first commandment of fasting was way before we even realized fasting was a thing. And that is what I try to keep in mind, that fasting is fasting from my self-reliance,
Mm.
you know, and eating of the tree of life is total dependence on God, total and utter dependence on God, you know, and that dependence is what will lead us to all of those spiritual acts and spirit and virtues, you know. If you are in communion with, if your roots are connected to the root of a tree, the tree of life, you are naturally going to produce the same fruit,
Mm.
right? So anyway, that imagery, like when you brought it up
I
about
like
the
that.
pre-fallen state and the Garden of Eden, I mean, everything can be just like summarized from that one story. So
Mm.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate to, because when we talk about like that surrendering, that self-reliance, and or the church fathers will call that like the surrendering of the will. Um, a lot of people think of it as weakness, because you're
oh
just
yeah.
like, oh, you're incapable of making decisions for yourself, or you're too weak to like, no, but like the idea is that you have to have tasted real and have acquired a strong will of yourself and understood and gotten to the point and tested it to know that you can't do it by yourself. You cannot do it by yourself, and then you surrender it. It's for the strongest of the strongest, not for the weak. To get to a
Yes.
point where you've mastered the art of decision making and strong personality and respected everywhere and the boss of your bosses, and then give that up, total surrender. That's total humility, and
Yep.
it takes a lot to be able to get to that point. And you could totally make the argument that fasting is one of the ways to get you there. Is that it can humble you, it can bring you back, and it can take your focus off of that, off of yourself and onto other
Mm.
things. And like you both have been saying, is that in a sense that almsgiving if done separated from fasting and prayer, then you're giving something that is yours. You're giving your own stuff. And fasting without almsgiving or without prayer is also just acquiring self-discipline. And prayer without fasting and without almsgiving um, is just prayer without action. And God is not in a business of no action or inaction. So you need to take that prayer, exercise it in fasting and in almsgiving in order to get there. Uh, Sandra, I want to touch back on something you said earlier and kind of segue into the next point here, in the sense that you've talked about how fasting in the Orthodox Church is a little bit unique. And you talked a little bit about the two camps of people who are very strict by the rules. Like, this is just the way it's done, and you can't veer from the rules. And people are like, it's whatever. Like, you don't have to be that uptight about it. It's not a big deal. And the truth is, you also spoke about the communal aspect of fasting, is that we're fasting together. And that is supposed to be something in remembrance. The truth is, and you both please chime in on this, is that what also differentiates the Orthodox fasting from others is that the truth is somewhere in the middle between these two camps. Is that, yes, there are rules, but these rules are supposed to be tailored more or customized more to the individual. They're meant as guidance and a building block. And that's what differentiates between our fasting and some other fasting in other religions, is that everyone fasts the same way. And although we have rules to guide us on how we fast, there is a next level to that is supposed to cater that to the individual. So the main boundaries are the communal. The church fasts together. We all fast at the same time in the calendar. But we might also fast a little bit differently according to our own backgrounds and weaknesses, where we come from, the things that we need to work on. Can you both talk to me a little bit about that? How is that really unique to the Orthodox Church, and how can we really benefit from
that? Well, I guess the one thing I had thought about with this is that what's interesting in other Christian faiths that do fasting, the individuals create their own rules for fasting, right? So everybody picks what thing that they want to give up, right? And the Orthodox Church does not do that. And the Orthodox faithful, it's a guide from the mother church, and we follow all the same guidelines. Of course, even within that, what is beautiful is that there is still individual tailoring, right? Because you're depending on your relationship with your father of confession or your spiritual father, and your guidance and your own journey in the spiritual, like in your spiritual journey, there could be some extra guidelines, but it's still not something you decide in a silo by yourself,
extra
I just think
guidelines or less guidelines,
what?
or less guidelines
Yeah.
sometimes too?
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. Yeah, it
Right.
could be more or
Yeah.
less, or,
Yeah.
just different. And also, which I just think it's funny, like every time Lent comes around, you can see how it's expressed so differently in different faiths and different practices. I've even seen like more Protestant communities taking on that, like giving up something for Lent, that type of thing. But I mean, and of course, I don't know like their spiritual journeys, so I can't speak to that. But there the really like unique thing definitely about the Orthodox Church is that there are general guidelines and individual guidelines. And it's always decided upon hand in hand with a guide, which is so it's always, like it's humbling, because you have to kind of actually I'll give you an interesting story. One time I told my spiritual father I wanted to do something. I wanted to give away something, okay? I told him, and I was really excited about it. And he told me no. He told me I can't give it away. And it was during a fast. I was like so psyched about it. I was like, I really thought about it, and it was like it was something I was gonna give to someone who needed something, and he told me no. He told me to keep it.
Mm.
And I was annoyed. I was like, what is this? Well, I wanted to actually, do something like other than just giving, like eating vegan. But it was such a great, even my own response to that, to his direction, was telling of my pride in that situation. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So that's why I just think it's so beautiful that the church has given us these, our guides, our spiritual fathers, and I have heard so many iterations of complaints of, why do I need a father for confession? Why do I need a spiritual guide? Sorry, Father Elijah, just close your ears. Um, but
No, no,
it's
I mean,
just
I hear it all the time. I get it.
Mhm.
exactly. But it's just amazing because even in the response to my priest saying no, it was very evident of my intentions. He knew right away that it was going to be self-serving in the end,
Mm.
and it wasn't worth feeding my pride, especially when I was trying to do the opposite, almost like tricking myself. Anyway, I'm just sharing that story to show like the uniqueness in the Orthodox community of fasting is that we have general guidelines, but we also have individual ones with guidance, and it's so needed and so important. And um, it's just it's a beautiful way to actually have and participate in a spiritual banquet, which is ironic in a time of fasting, right? The Orthodox Church just prepares like spiritual dish after spiritual dish on this table, especially during a fast, and when you walk away from your own table, your own altar that you created for yourself, in which you honor yourself and that you feed yourself and you feed your own hungers and you feed your pride in ways you didn't even realize you were feeding your pride. When you walk away from that table, which you think is a feast, and you walk to the table that the church and Christ himself has prepared for you, then you actually like realize this is dining. This is
Mm.
real living.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so that to me is, I mean, so I know people, I don't like this. I've said this before, but I just feel like other practices of the Christian faith are kind of like drive-through fast food type of thing. And then when you get to the Orthodox Church, you're like, oh my gosh, I've been eating McDonald's Happy Meals my whole life. And here I am with a full spread, like full spiritual spread banquet. So,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's my favorite part about kind of having conversations with people that are converts is we like, for example, at St. Mark, we have like 12 to 15 people every week that just show up to our church.
Oh,
And it's
wow.
amazing when I have these conversations with people and I'm like, what brought you here? It's like we want something that's very liturgically rich. We want something that is very like um just it's meaty and we feel like that's what we're longing for. But there's so much that you said, Sandra, that like really resonated with me. First of all, thank you very much. Because I don't think any priest wants lots of customers in terms of like as being a spiritual, like sorry, like we love all of our spiritual
I
children,
got you. I got you.
but like Lent in particular is like my busiest time of year. Like, and naturally in a church like the size of ours, I'm busy 24/7.
Yeah.
Sorry to everybody for the last 6 months. But the reality is I love that you highlighted a number of things. I was writing down a bunch of stuff that you were saying as you were saying it because there's so much that you just said. So I think first off, like I always will say the priest is your personal trainer. You want like to grow, you need somebody who can coach you in your areas where your weaknesses lie. And we always will love to say like, oh, I can do it on my own. Like, yeah, sure. How's that been going for you? Right? Like, have you grown in the last year? Have you grown in the last 2 years? Have you grown in the last 5 years? If you find a really good spiritual father, like, and really be very particular about who you pick. It's like somebody that you're marrying. You're really developing a very close, intimate bond with somebody, and they're going to know you better than you know yourself. My spiritual father, I love him because he knows my weaknesses and he calls me out of my garbage, right? And he coaches me, he encourages me, he pushes me in the areas where my shortcomings lies. Um, and I think oftentimes we are more concerned about people's feelings, but the reality is a real spiritual father is focused on the condition of your soul. And that this is not a conversation about like your spiritual father, but I think fasting, like fasting done right, your spiritual father will cater your fast according to what exactly your needs are and the condition of your soul. So, for example, the people who follow rules very well, camp one, maybe what you need to do in your fast is not to necessarily just follow the rules. It's easy to follow rules for rule followers, but
Yeah.
maybe what you need is to actually really let yourself be free in Christ. And what does that look like? It's very specific to your vices, the things that you're struggling with, and the virtue that your spiritual father is hoping that you acquire through the fast. So yeah, there's like this economia, this spiritual economy that we have, this spiritual flexibility that we give our spiritual children according to what their ailments lie. And hence the story that you told about your spiritual father, right? Like my spiritual father tells me after a long day, which I'm terrible at, that I need to go home and I need to clean my house, as an act of like, yeah, you've loved everybody, but have you loved your wife as much as you loved everybody else? And I hate him when he says that. Forgive me, Abu. He says that to me. It drives me crazy because I'm like, I've been giving so much. I just want
Yeah.
to come home and be given,
Yeah.
But no, this is where you have to self-empty. This is where you have to self-deny. And this is where you have to self-forget more. So there's that ascetic practice of I need to let go more of myself, and that's where my spiritual father is catering the exact specific thing that he wants me to grow in. So yeah, I mean, I'm so glad that you talked about that, because I think it's really so. Talk to your spiritual fathers. If you don't have a spiritual father, you're missing out on a personal trainer. And yeah, you're trying to get fit, but you've been doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And you know what the definition of that is? Insanity. So maybe try something different. Maybe meet with somebody. Maybe ask for some guidance. And look for a spiritual father that actually will coach you and actually will push you and motivate you to draw into deeper loving union with God.
Mm.
Be very picky. I'm not saying that, sorry, all the blessed fathers out there, but
Yeah.
it's everybody. There needs to be a match with you and your spiritual child.
Yeah, everyone. It doesn't matter where your spiritual journey has taken you or has not taken you, needs to have a sit down with either a father of confession or a spiritual guide.
Yeah.
And also, a spiritual guide does not always, by virtue, have to be a priest. There are
Yeah.
also a lot of people who are trusted by a lot of clergy that are elderly and have been tested, not elderly, elders, not necessarily elderly, but like their spirit of discernment has been tested, and you can have like a council of people guiding you who have your best interest in mind.
I love
Like
that, Mina, but I almost want to interject now as a priest just on
yes,
this part.
yes,
I think it's really great when you have both in one. If you don't have it, fine, I totally get it. But it's really great when you have somebody that can be your
totally,
spiritual father and your spiritual guide. Because you
totally,
trust that person with your soul. Why wouldn't you trust them to guide you?
totally.
Right? Like,
Yeah,
because we have this idea that confession is transactional. It's just like me going, but like, no, it's the goal is to grow deeper and deeper into loving union with God.
yeah. No, so
So
I didn't
sorry,
mean
sorry. I
to.
didn't mean to. Because
No,
I hear a
I
lot of people tell that. Like in my church, we're four priests, and some people will say, like, we have amazing priests in our church. Like, oh, Abuna is my father confession, and no, you're my spiritual guide. I'm like, I love you. I'm happy to be your spiritual guide.
yeah.
But like, why? You have an amazing spiritual father right there that you can sort of use as your spiritual guide as well. I think we're sometimes looking for somebody to give us the answer that we're looking for.
Right. Make things easier. And you're right on point with that, is that it's it's always better if you can find both in one person. And in extreme situations where you can't, look for guidance, yes. But yeah, it's every one of us needs to
Sorry,
be able
forgive
to
me,
have.
Mina. I don't mean
No, what do you mean?
I
No,
love the spiritual
it's
guides. We have so many great spiritual guides in
totally.
the Coptic Church and Orthodox Church in general.
But I think there's a lot to what you're saying in the sense that because most of us are not able to be open with people that we're not confessing to. I can come to my father confession, I'm my spiritual guide, and he knows me better than any person who is also a spiritual guide in my life, than anyone else, right? So he has almost all the keys, and he has the best opportunity at giving the best direction, um, and who can pray with me and can guide me through this. So I totally agree with you on that. Um, but the point is, each and every one of us needs to have that conversation um, with our spiritual guides, because every fast and every year it might change. They might give you different advice and say, okay, this year you need to work on this, or that year it's supposed to be um, a practical element to all these rules. The church says we all fast together as a church, but we don't all struggle with the same things. Some of us have different needs. Some of us have different nutritional needs. Some need vitamins. Some need stronger dosages of steroids. So how do you cater that? You have to speak to someone who knows how to um, how to give you a proper physical, or how to give you a proper diagnosis and give you a proper prescription based on what it is that you need. And if you go taking the same prescription as everyone else because everyone else is taking it, then you're not doing yourself any favors. This is how we go for years without having any real growth. So I think for me, the point is I'm reminded that I need to go speak with my spiritual father to say, what are we going to do about Lent this year? So that I can benefit from it the most. So thank you both for sharing, bringing that to the forefront of the conversation. Um, any any other thoughts? Last points, things on your heart.
Last call.
Yeah, last call.
Um, Gosh, I think I wanted to touch on one last thing. Well, I also wanted to encourage people. I just want to share that I have been in locations where I felt like I couldn't really, like I would just use use the priest for confession because I wanted to make sure that I still practice that sacrament. But maybe because of language barriers or cultural barriers, it was hard to really get tangible or like readily applicable guidance in what I was going through because maybe he didn't experience that, or it was just hard for him to really, and they would just say like God loves you, and I was like, well, that's great. I mean, I'm happy to hear that, but I just want to encourage anyone who is in that type of situation, no matter where you are, um, please don't forget that fathers of confession and spiritual guides are mouthpieces for Christ and for God. So go to God. You can still have, what I mean by that is use your father of confession and still have that, go through the sacrament, but pray to God to use whoever that spiritual father is, whoever that father of confession is, to say what you need to say, or sorry, say what you need to hear, and Christ will speak on his lips. I mean,
Amen.
it happened to me, and also pray. I mean, Father Elijah, I'm sure you would welcome the prayers too. Our clergy need the support. I think
1000%.
we forget that they need our prayers, they need our support. So whoever is local to you, if you don't have access to somebody who you quote unquote jive with or whatever, just know that they are the mouthpiece of God. So let God speak through them, and you might, and give them an opportunity to say what God wants to say to you. I just mean, not to be discouraged if you feel like there isn't like a really good connection, and just know that if God can speak through a donkey to give a message when it's needed, he will absolutely speak through somebody who's ordained to be his conduit. So don't be discouraged if there isn't somebody you feel connected to, or who like gets you, Then the other last thing I wanted to say was, fasting. There's sometimes when in the Orthodox Church, sometimes we talk about fasting and it's all about restoration. Like when we fast and we pray, we will be healed, and we can cast out whatever, and we can achieve this, and we can like restore health for our mind, body, and soul. It's just like, I mean, and rightfully so, that is what is discussed. And actually, I'm pretty sure the I think the term Lent actually specifically for this season of this upcoming season of fasting, I think Lent actually means spring. I think like the root word of it means spring. So it's like everything about that major fast is focused on renewal and restoration and resurrection. Okay. But one thing I wanted to just mention is that renewal, that restoration, that resurrection may not come in the form that we are expecting it to come. I just think it's so important. Sometimes the prosperity gospel message sneaks into our faith circles, and we want healing for everybody. We want restoration for everybody. We want relationships to be improved and turned on their heads, and we want people's physical ailments to be healed with fasting and prayer and all that. But I just wanted to make a point to say that restoration may not be here on this earth. And just because we don't experience it here doesn't mean your fasting and your prayer has failed. So, and I just want to say that because I do think our society, I mean, that culture, that talk, the prosperity gospel, not just about wealth, but really about like being disease free and being, which I am very passionate about. But there are times when God gives us ailments or pain or illness or relationship problems or whatever for some reason that we will never see maybe on this earth. I mean, St. Paul himself had a thorn in his side that God would not remove. So anyway, I just want to throw that out there to encourage anyone who feels like, well, that you go into a season of fasting, praying for something very specifically, maybe a child, maybe your own relationship, maybe an addiction, maybe it's so many things, or just like apathy. I think a lot of us, we have access to everything now. Some of us are fine and everything's good, but like life feels meaningless. Like there's so many things that people go into seasons of fasting, hoping like for the prize at the end of it. And the prize is not here on this earth, is what I'm trying to say. So anyway, I definitely have other nutritional things. I just don't want to, I know we kind of went over time.
No, go ahead.
Go
Drop
for it.
'em.
Dump some
Yeah.
nutritional stuff.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just remembered one last thing about nutrition. So something very specific that also I was hoping to mention was that blood sugar dysregulation has been such a rising problem these days. And I want to make it a point that fasting can be extremely, extremely challenging for people who are hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic. So you either, let's say your body gets rid of sugar way too fast, so you can crash and you can pass out from your blood sugar levels being too high, or sorry, being too low, or when you eat, your blood sugar spikes really, really high, which also causes similar problems. So, and so the reason why I'm bringing this up is sometimes during fasts, if you don't know you have a blood sugar dysregulation issue, you could be like super moody during fasting times, or just hormones are all over the place, or you're just emotional, or you just don't know. And like what you don't realize is that the physiology of your body is actually controlling that. And so I just want all of us to be practical. Like if that's something that you are going through and you can tell like, oh, well, if I go, I want to fast, actually abstain for like 9 hours or whatever, but you are jittery and, a lot of, I mean, there could be so many other symptoms. Please, I beg you to talk to your father of confession about that, and also get checked medically. Like we can't, fasting is supposed to strengthen you both in mind and body, and or sorry, in spirit and body. And if your mood is all over the place and you're just imbalanced, it's going to be counterproductive. And it's really important to know how to balance your blood sugar. If your body isn't already in a strong physical state, it's so important that you address this. And talk, like, I know, and another story. I know cancer patients who are Orthodox and have to eat meat during the fast. Of course, these are outlier situations, but I'm just saying, and they're crying while they're eating meat because they don't want to, because they want to fast. I mean, imagine that state where you're having to eat animal products during the fast because of a medical condition, and your heart wants to, anyway, I'm just showing you there's so many things to keep in mind, and also so important to be humble and aware enough of your physical state, in conjunction with the guidance of your spiritual father, so that you can fast properly. And that definition, fasting properly, fasting done right, is a conjunction of a togetherness from the rules of the church and also individual guidelines from your father, your spiritual father, and possibly even physician. So, okay, that's it. I'm done, I promise.
No, thank you so much for that last plug because it totally makes sense. And just a little disclaimer: we're not responsible for any medical advice given on this
Yes, thank
platform.
you.
But okay,
Thank
but
you. Also,
This is not a medical
these
podcast.
opinions do not represent the
Although
opinions of the government.
all three of us have medical degrees.
Yeah, exactly.
no,
But
but
this is
totally, I think it is really important to, from a health perspective, to get your physician also looped in on what you're doing in terms of your dietary restrictions.
For sure.
There's no reason why you shouldn't do that.
yeah.
And if you're having to submit to certain restrictions because of your health conditions, that is not something to be upset about. I mean, there is plenty of ways to make that up. so so
Totally.
yeah. Again, like we said, I hope that we can all figure out a way to really hone in on the true spirit of fasting. And like you both have been saying, yeah, the Orthodox Church has a lot of amazing answers to that if and should we look for them. Um, a lot of us are still fasting like it's McDonald's is the best thing for us, and we're hard-headed when it comes to wanting to change. You spoke a little bit about apathy, Sandra, and I totally get that. And I think one of the biggest things we can get from fasting is repent from apathy and indifference to the world around us and its pain. Something that we all need to refocus our fasting on so that we can become part of the mind of God and the heart of God and his hands and feet, so that fasting can become practical and prayer can become practical in the world that's around us. So thank you for that reminder. Father Elijah, take it away.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much. So many gems in this podcast. Um, I guess I just, the only way that fasting can be done right is if, like you said, Sandra, like body, soul, and spirit are all aligned. That my body is a temple, that I've taken care of it. I am so guilty. Like actually uh the comment that you said or throughout this podcast about like convenience really convicted me, because I feel like that's always been like, oh, I just want to like do whatever's easier so I can like pray more, so I can like do more, like, but I think there's that like slowness of slowing down and being prayerful even when you're preparing your food, or going to the grocery store. Like prayer is not like I think sometimes we think prayer is only the inner room, but prayer is an ongoing dialogue with your beloved. It's an ongoing relationship with him. And I think the more and more maybe we incorporate that aspect, like that's the part that I really want to incorporate in my fast this year, is like I just really want to slow down, do things that sometimes are a little bit more challenging, prepare foods that are a little bit healthier. Um, and in hope that the byproduct is that I have slowed down to hear his voice more, to love him more, to give his love to other people more. and with the end result of me just knowing him more. Because I think there have been so many seasons in which I fasted and I didn't have that as the end result. It was just about doing the rules, and I've missed him in the end. So I think I just want to share one final thing with what Saint Jerome finishes. He says, "What sense does it make to fast on required days, but to eat immoderately on days before and after? Fasting and abstinence should be rooted in meditation on the word of God in the heart."
Mm.
So it's just like let's make this the fasting season, but let's incorporate the word of God and let the word of God being capital W, not just scripture, but him as the word of God, meditating on his goodness, keeping him in our heart throughout this whole season, so that we in the end could really be drawn into deeper loving relationship with him. So Sandra, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, I really appreciate that convicting message for me.
Me
And
too.
hopefully I can take care of my temple a little bit better during this next 55 days that started March 11th. Boot camp begins March 11th,
I
ladies
know,
and
boot camp, exactly. Actually, really, really funny. I saw this church that has a sign that says, Lent is spring training, and the Feast of the Resurrection is opening day. I thought it was really funny. But yeah,
Yep.
boot camp, basically.
Boot camp begins March
Yeah,
11th.
exactly. Thanks for
Me too.
having me,
Amen
guys.
to that. It
Nina,
was
close us out.
it was our pleasure, Sandra. I mean, we started planning for this 2 years ago, and I'm glad we finally got an episode
We
on the
did it.
record.
We
Yeah.
did
So thank you so much for being here, and thank you to all who tuned in. We love you. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share our thoughts and the things that are on our minds with you. Thank you for listening. Please keep giving us feedback. Give us your thoughts, your comments. Help us become better. Because you are, in a way, already helping us become better. Uh, if you missed this episode or you don't know where to get it, you can ask. I'm not gonna, Buna. I'm not gonna say you can ask Alexa to play the podcast for you, because apparently
No, it
statistics
doesn't.
show only one person has ever done that in
Yes.
the
I
history of
think
the
it was
podcast.
me. I think it was
Yeah,
me
so
that did.
so just get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We love you. I hope we have a great Lent and a beneficial fast, and we leave you with the grace of God until we see you next time.
Peace.